Well, it is my joy and delight to welcome a super dear friend to me. You saw his video at the top of this service. His name is Tyler Merritt, and I've known Tyler ever since college. And if I've ever met, there's never been anyone in my life who, few people who've walked into a room and like the lights get brighter. There's like 80 more watts in the bulb when Tyler walks into the room. He just fills the room with life, and it's so good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you too, man. It has been quite some time, but I am so glad to be with you and know that Jesus literally has your back right now behind you.
He's right back
It's
here.
he has your back.
He does. He does. Yeah, if anyone knows me too well, it's probably Tyler, but that's for another interview. Um, so we watched your Before You Call the Cops, which is a brilliant piece. You have another brilliant piece called The Playlist. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's worth every bit as much worth watching. Interestingly enough, it was on Jimmy Kimmel last week, and I love the piece because it really, if you know Tyler Merritt, I'm just watching my friend Tyler. It's a very authentic voice coming out of you, and it strikes me that I don't understand how someone couldn't watch you or experience you without feeling warm fuzzies. If you got Tyler Merritt plus you got a party. And yet I recognize you made this video because not everyone does experience warm fuzzies. That's my assumption. Is that the truth?
Here in Nashville, I try to walk a few miles a day for exercise, and there's a part in one of the trails that I take where I had to cross a street, and there was a stoplight, so I knew I was going to cross the road. And across from me was an older white woman who was in a truck. She had her window rolled down, and she was looking ahead of me. Now I'm on this side of the road, knowing that I have to cross her, and because it's hot, I wear a bandana when I go and run. When I go and walk, let's don't act like I run because I don't run. I ran once, like in third grade, and then figured out it wasn't for me. But like I'll wear a bandana, I'll wear a hoodie, I have my sunglasses on and my headphones. And I am very aware that I am a 6'2" black man. I'm very aware of this. And with this, I know I'm about to cross this road, meaning I'm gonna come about 6 inches from her. And so I took off my glasses, I took off my bandana, I dropped my headphones so that she knew that I could hear her. I took my hoodie down, and I walked across the street. And as I walked across the street, I walked slowly and kind of put on a smile. And I was about 4 or 5 steps away from her car, and she looks towards me and sees me and not only jumps, but it was like she was out of a movie. It was over exaggerated. Like, oh, she goes and she rolls up her window. She grabs the steering wheel really strongly. She's looking ahead, like as if to say, just turn green, turn green, turn green. And typically, man, I would have just walked past her
Yeah.
and not have said anything. But at this specific moment, I walked past and I laughed at her, but I didn't laugh in a way like, oh, you're funny. I laughed in a way of like, if you knew how small I had to make myself for you. I just was on this side of the road doing everything I possibly could to make myself as small as I possibly can be so that you would feel safe. But in reality, if you knew me, if you knew that I was listening to a Broadway musical in my headphones, it was at the time was probably going beat up, bop, bop, or whatever, or
Yeah.
uh, if you knew that I was a Sunday school teacher, if if you just knew me, not only would you have reacted differently, but maybe you would have not only wanted to be my friend, but maybe you would even love me. And so as I walked across the street, perhaps you would look at me and think, oh man, I bet you I would love that guy. But
Mm.
I don't have the privilege, Brent, to just walk around assuming people are going to love me, because I know that that's not what I look like to some people.
Yeah. the only thing that I can think is it would make me so frustrated and it would make me so angry to deal with that, um, because you're a good guy, you have a good heart, you are, to use Michael Jackson's words, a lover, not a fighter, right? Like that's who you are. And I had to work him in somehow.
If your congregation only knew, if they only knew the true love that you have for MJ. Okay.
I still haven't forgiven you for not putting him in the playlist. I was
Yeah,
listening.
my bad. My bad.
Crazy. Here, you grew up in Las Vegas, pretty integrated city. We went to college in Santa Cruz, Bay Area, probably like no more integrated place in the country. You're now in Nashville. It's the new South, but I've been to Nashville. There's a lot of Confederate flags that fly out just outside of the city limits. And so I think one of the things that we on the West Coast think is, well, this is the South's problem. We don't really deal with that here. Have you found a difference in terms of racism, and what would you say to folks who are feeling like that on the West Coast?
Well, let me give you something, man, that this will give you a picture of this will give you an idea of the world that you live in and that I live in. Let me tell you how I thought what you just said was going to go. I heard that I know you grew up, Tyler, in Las Vegas, a pretty integrated place, and then you moved to Santa Cruz that was not integrated at all. That's where I thought you were going. But to you, it felt integrated. But let me ask you this question. Outside of me, how many other African American people did you experience at Bethany?
Yeah, I think as you say that, probably you could count it on both hands, right?
Now, out of the people that you can count on both hands, how many of those people came there because they were recruited to play a sport?
Well, I don't really hang out with jocks, so the
There
people
you
that
go.
I know, wouldn't have been the case.
Right, but when I came to Bethany, I was one of the few black men that was over 6 feet tall that was not on the basketball team. Yeah. One of the reasons that I have dreadlocks to this day is that when I moved to Santa Cruz, nobody sold black hair products. Couldn't find them in Scotts Valley. There was one store in Santa Cruz that sold black hair products. And that was in Northern California, where I went to go to college. So even in your mind, when you look back on your college experience, you think, I lived in an area in Santa Cruz that was relatively integrated. Now, there's not a ton of huge racial tension in that area because people tend to be quite liberal, right? Yeah. So there tends to be this equality presence, but equality does not necessarily mean racial integration. You know what I mean? Racial integration. And actually, you remember Leah Stevens?
Yeah.
I started dating Leah as a freshman, and she took me home. She wouldn't mind me telling the story because we've since talked about this. She had a discussion with her parents just recently. She took me home for Easter, and we were dating, but about 2 minutes before we got to her house, she said to me, "Hey, I know you're coming over for Easter, but we can't tell our parents that we're dating." And I thought to myself, maybe we can't tell. I genuinely thought we can't tell them we're dating because maybe she wasn't supposed to be dating. Like, you know what I mean? And it's college, it's a Christian school. Maybe she wasn't supposed to be dating. It did not occur to me that what she was saying was, my parents will have a serious issue with me bringing back a romantic interest who is a black guy. And we have talked about that since, and she went and talked to her parents today, or just recently, and told them about the situation, and they almost had a repentant spirit about them, saying, "No, you're 100% right. We would have not accepted that." So all that to say, that gives you an idea of
Yeah.
the two worlds that we live in. When you look back and think about Bethany, you think in Santa Cruz, you think integrated. I think I couldn't find hair products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What was the
that is
question?
very enlightening. Well, do you experience racism more in a place like Nashville with the Confederate flags than, on the West Coast? And I think what you just said was that there's plenty of racism to be found on the West Coast.
There is, but it's I did a special for MSNBC a couple of years ago called Everyday Racism in America. And the special was just talking about little things of racism that most of the time we don't recognize, we don't see. It doesn't really scream out racism, but it's there. I don't know if you remember the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, right?
Yeah.
It came out, well, since I've lived here in Nashville, and I was in a theater in Mount Juliet, which is about 20 minutes away from me. I'm watching this movie, and I'm in it, right? I'm like, this movie is so intense. And they get to the part where they're like, now we need to go to Tennessee. And I was like, wait, this movie happened where I'm at right now. Like, they're talking about the slaves here. Like, I could be on slave ground right now. And even though I knew that, the South does have a history that is different. The South has a history of racism that is woven into the fabrics of who they are. So there's a segregation that takes place here that I can go to a movie theater and go in, and every Black person that's there, if I'm in a certain part of town, if it's a white part of town, the only Black people will be in the theater work there, which says a lot about the fact that the only people that are in this building right now, we are paying them to sustain this environment.
Yeah. That's
not an unusual idea for the South. But if you're not paying attention to that, which most people don't, that is showing the history of who we are. The fact that we can even go into a town where it's only white people and the Black people are driving into town to be there to work the jobs that are paying minimum wage speaks volume about how the South works. And then that ties in to everything else. But on the same vein, though, first time I moved to Nashville, man, I was here probably about 2 weeks. And this is the first place that I've ever felt this thing. I was with Mike Holzer, who is my best friend in Bama. He's in the video. I've known each other for as long as I've known you. And we lived with each other for 20 years almost. We were in Target, and he was in front of me checking out. This is when we first moved to Nashville. He was in front of me, and I was right behind him. And the guy behind the counter was a Black dude. And even though Mike and I were together, like walking together, buying our stuff, the Black dude looked at me and was like, hey, kind of gave me a nod. And it was the first time that I felt like, hey, I see you, man. It's us and them. Like there was a thing in me, even though I moved here with Nashville with Mike, he gave me this look like, hey, you good? And I responded back to him like, yeah, I'm good, man. Like I recognize that you were recognizing me, and then it's us here. Yeah. I had never felt that way in Las Vegas. And it spoke volumes for how the South feels in the history that is here. Yeah.
I have another dear friend that lives in Louisiana, and it struck me as like, I do not understand, I cannot even comprehend why a person of color would want to live in Louisiana knowing the history. And his father said, at least white people, if they're racist, they'll be racist to your face here. Whereas, on the West Coast, you never knew what you were going to be dealing with on a daily basis.
That is the truth.
Yeah. The last couple of weeks have been some of the ugliest, I think, since Rodney King. I think some of the ugliest since the civil rights struggle. I feel like we're watching some things on the television right now that'll be like Selma in some ways in years to come. And I know that I find it hard as a pastor we've been dealing with this for so long. I was listening to Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation
Of
the
course
other
you were.
day, and yeah, that's no surprise to you. But like that album was 30 years ago, but everything that we're talking about, racial injustice, uh, police violence, gun violence, um, shooting up schools, it's like it could be written today. And of course, we know, like you listened to Marvin Gaye a generation before Janet, and we're still dealing with this stuff. And I want to give up hope. How in the world do you keep hope that somehow things are going to get better?
Let me tell you, there's two sides to this, right? There's the people of color are just tired size, right? And this is why we're tired. This feels a little bit different than 2 years ago for some people, but it doesn't for people of color. Brent, do you realize how exhausting it is to attempt to convince somebody that what they are seeing in front of their eyes on tape in front of them is what they are actually seeing? Just the energy it takes for me to convince somebody that what they are watching is what they are actually watching. That by itself, nothing else, not the existence, not the fear, not the possibility that walking down the street can be a threat, just the simple thing of trying to convince somebody who's not Black that, hey, see this thing that you just watched? You are actually watching that.
Yeah.
And the response being back to you, well, I don't know, maybe the guy was sick, or maybe you don't exactly know the scenario or situation, or maybe you don't know. I'm exhausted trying to convince you that what you're seeing is happening.
Yeah.
Because when you begin to question that, now don't get me wrong, there are scenarios in the world of whatever, and I understand that. But when I continue to watch people that look like me get killed on video,
Yeah.
and not just people that look like me, people that could be me.
Yeah.
When I see people that can be me continue to get killed, and I have to convince you that that is what's happening, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Then there's the reality of that that's a life that has been lost. There's a reality that the Black community is echoing a sadness that goes way, way deeper than just, oh no, we lost somebody else. It's the cries of hearing mothers going, that could have been my son.
Mm-hmm.
Fathers going, that could have been me.
Yeah.
So there's all of that, right?
Yeah.
And then you ask, how do I see hope? This is how. You have kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know you have kids. How old are they?
11 and 9.
It's hard not to look at your 9-year-old and feel hopeful.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm going to take the younger one because I know you're starting to get into the, but even when they were little kids, when you would look and see a 5-year-old kid, you know, or you see a first grader, a second grader, or a baby, you know, and you look into these kids' eyes and you go, the only concern you have in the world right now is where's your next meal going to come from? And when can you sleep again? And when can you play? And will you laugh today? And
Yeah.
when you see that in a child's eyes, it echoes the sentiment of what it's like to be a follower of Christ, knowing that we have a God who really does see us. And that there was a period of time in our lives where we felt that same childlike faith that we were going to be okay. So as people of color, we don't have the option not to hope, because we've had decades and decades and decades and decades of seeing these things. So we have to believe that we are continually being carried, that it's going to get better, that a day is going to come we do not have the privilege to believe that that day is not going to come, or we would give up. Someone asked me recently, now, how do you feel right now? Are you more fearful to walk the streets because of what happened to George Floyd? What happened to George Floyd last week? Has it changed your week? I am no more afraid to walk down the street today than I was 20 years ago. You're just seeing this now. And now, because of Amy Cooper, one of the, though it's horrible, that whole situation with Amy Cooper that happened, who, if your congregation isn't familiar, she called the phone on a black guy in Central Park who was a bird watcher. The only kind of good thing that came out of that is what she did was so blatantly wrong. Like, so you couldn't twist the story at all. It was so oddly wrong that people were able to look and go, oh, so that actually happens. With George Floyd, I think the reason that it speaks to people so long, that if you watch that video, after about 10 seconds of being on his neck, you find yourself as a watcher going, okay, we can probably stop now. 20 seconds go by and you're like, we can probably stop now. And it begins to hurt in such a way that you find yourself going, this is not going to end well. But because that's so clear, it tended to be not very arguable for people. But I watch a video like Philando Castile, and I see the cop come up to the window, and I hear him say, just want to let you know, I'm a registered gun owner. And all I'm thinking as a black man is, this is not going to end well.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't going to end well. Like, to me, that's me being 20 seconds into the George Floyd video. I'm like, his knee is already on your neck, bro. This isn't going to end good. So anyways, I know that's a long answer having to do with hope, but I see different pockets and visions of negativity. I see different pockets and visions of things that make me tired, but I just don't have the privilege not to be hopeful. And for me, I see it in our kids, and hoping that we can build a future that's going to be better for them. And I'm hoping that I can play a part in that.
You are playing a part in that. And I think one thing that gives me hope is that there are folks like you who personalize the struggle for justice, who, are unashamed to become naked on a video and just talk about your experience and let people know what does this feel like? Because I think if you don't live with those frames on, it's a shock when you recognize, oh my gosh, like I would be through if I had to deal with this at all, like let alone deal with it for a day, but to deal with it for a lifetime. I was talking with some friends the other day, and I was like, I think what you talk about when we talk about privilege, there's like that infuriates some people, but there's like a credit account, like a credit card that we have that not everyone else has access to. And it's just in terms of the benefit of the doubt that a person with my skin color, a person who looks like me, who is also 6'3", but I'm going to be given a benefit of a doubt that you are not going to be given. And that is the unfairness, that the little old lady who got freaked out in the car, she's not going to get freaked out if she sees me. She might get startled, but she's not going to get freaked out and frightful. And I do believe that we're going to get there. I do believe in Dr. King's words that we are going to get not only to the mountaintop, but we're going to get into the promised land. And it's, I take it with great pride that you, through our curriculum, have been the ones that have taught my kids about Jesus and about the Bible. And I think that's going to do something as well too. And I feel like we just have to do this together. There's just no way. And I think for the first time, we are doing it differently. I think I will say, like, for the first time, I looked at the George Floyd with the dude's knee on his neck, and I began to say, what if that was my son? Right? Like I would go crazy. I would go crazy if
I'll
that
tell
was my
you,
son.
I'll tell you, I think I think for you to be able to empathize, being able to say, what if that was my son, is a way that can connect with you. Where privilege, and I want to talk about privilege here in just a second because I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that video and I think, what if that was me?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was me.
Yeah.
And he could be me. I just want to, just really quick, if I could talk about privilege for a second, because I think this is really important for people who are not of color to hear this. Although Black people are not monolithic. Like we are not all the same. So I can't speak on behalf of every Black person. I would say this. I, as a Black person, and many Black people, do not hold privilege against people. The word privilege. There's a stigma that goes along that Black people look at white people and go, look where you've come from. Look at your history. Look what you're about. You know, you're so privileged with your lifestyle. You have all of these things. I did a racial reconciliation kind of meeting called The Safe Place. And I had a white friend of mine get super emotional where he talked about, when I hear the word privilege, it absolutely first turns me off. And he goes on to the story about how he was raised poor, how he went through all of these struggles and how his life was a certain way. And the other Black people in the room, we weren't only empathetic, but there was another Black male friend of mine that started crying as he was listening to this guy's story. And so the white guy at the end, it was like, hey, so when you say privilege, you don't know my story. And the Black guy just looked across the room and was like, man, I feel for your story. Your story is real. But that's not the kind of privilege we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about simply because the color of your skin. We live in two different worlds. Our worlds are just different. The reason why the woman in the truck looks over at you and feels differently than looking over at me is because when she sees you, she sees her child, she sees her brother, she sees her husband, she sees her grandpa, she sees a history of who she is connected to a land in which she has felt safe. When she looks over and sees me, she does not see any of that, especially if I'm not in her world. And the difference is that I do not have the privilege to look at her and feel the way that she feels about me. I can't look at her and go, I'm about to walk across the street and this white woman's going to get out and beat me to the ground. Like, I don't have the privilege to do that, or that's the continual fear that I would walk around with in the entirety of my life anywhere I wanted to go. But I also don't have the privilege to think that every single white person that I'm going to come across is going to trust me or know me or feel a certain way about me, that they're going to want to befriend me. You know, so I just wanted to draw that picture of privilege just so, especially your congregation can understand that Black people aren't walking around going, you privileged punk. It's really more of just an understanding that we do live in two different worlds, and we're not bitter about it. We're just trying to communicate to you what that is because of systematic racism, that we do walk in different worlds. And as soon as you're able to see that, then we can start to move forward. But the energy it takes for me to try to convince you of something that's right in front of your face is really, really hard.
I said to you, the last thing I wanted to do is to say, Tyler, how do we solve racism in the United States today? Because
Sure.
these are way complex problems. But for, a Caucasian parishioner in their 50s or their 60s or their 40s in a pretty white part of the country, what are some things that you think folks should do? How do we aid in the struggle for justice? What are some things
Oh
that we
man.
can do?
So I'm going to give you an answer. It's not going to save all racism for forever, but the answer I'm going to give will make a difference, but some of your folks will not want to hear this. One of the most infuriating things to walk through is feeling like people who you consider or think are allies are silent. Now, let me be clear. It's not the people that I assume or I think are going to be silent, like the people who I think may have some racial history or may have whatever. Those are not the people that I'm that concerned of. The people that I'm concerned of are the same people who their white kids come to Sunday school and their kids learn from a black man on a screen, talking to their kids, teaching them the gospel or teaching them whatever. They're the same people that say in conversation, I have black friends, or I would never hate a black person, or that would never be me. Those people, when those people are silent, that is how we do not constitute change. And I'm going to give you an example. This is what I mean by it's going to probably make some people go, If I have a soccer mom or suburban mom who is sitting at home and she is on Facebook, and we're just going to use that as an example because so many people are on social media, okay? Somebody is on Facebook and they're scrolling through and they see something that they know doesn't set right in their soul or in their heart, or on some level they look at and they go, oh man, I'm just going to scroll past that. Or they think, I'm going to come back later. Or they think, I'm just going to ignore that. I, or my mom, or my dad, I don't have the privilege to ignore that.
Right.
I don't have the privilege to just scroll on by. That affects me on a level that is deeper than just some words that somebody said that were wrong. But if you're scrolling down Facebook, that means that you're probably their friend. And if it doesn't sit in your soul, I need those people. We need those people. Those people that say, I have a black friend, or I would never feel that way, or black person, I have black people in my church. It's those people that we need to speak up. And even though it might just be on social media, and you might go, but I don't want to get into a fight. Yo, I fight every single day just to exist. So I do not pity your online stuff. I don't. Don't pity it. But if you scroll through and you don't say anything, you're not helping the cause. When you go, hey, here's this thing that someone said to me that I think is wise, or about color, or about race, or what might seem political, but I'm not going to let people know this because there's somebody else, even in my church, who might be offended or bothered that I'm going to make this statement. Or if I go, rest in peace to George Floyd, I pray for his family, I hope that they get better. And then you hesitate to even say that in a public forum because you're afraid that Skippy over here is going to come along and go, you don't know the whole story, you haven't seen the whole video, this, that, or whatever. I would ask you, what was it that you felt in your soul when you were going to post that thing? I need you to speak up. Because if you can't speak up in that tiny format on your phone, on this thing that you hold in your hand all the time, if you can't speak in that format, how do I think that you are going to stand to me in any other environment? And then you question, is racism going to ever end? When you are afraid that the person in your church is going to have a problem with you saying, I see what's actually happening in front of me, and I have empathy, and I'm going to make a statement for this. Or, you really are my brother. You really are my sister. It's those little things. And though it may not seem like it's a small thing, Brent, that means the world to people of color. Trust me, if I'm on social media and I see somebody from our old school, I can name a couple people, legitimately name a couple people who put something that is asinine on social media. And I look at it and I think to myself, I ain't got the time nor energy. I'm too tired to argue with this dude. Me, because I shouldn't have to. And I go and click on it, and I see one of my white brothers and sisters is like, this is stupid. You know what I mean? I'm like, thank you. Thank you for standing up and representing that thing that speaks into your soul.
Yeah.
But I also know we went to a Bible college. And I mean this respectfully, bro. You know as well as I do. I have white brothers and sisters who are pastors of churches, who have built a career, that it costs them too much to stand up. It costs them too much to say something that is going to matter, because they know they're going to piss off somebody in their church. They know they're going to make somebody upset. It costs them too much. I do not have the privilege as a Black man to worry about how much my safety or the people around me, how much that is going to cost me. Because I currently live in an atmosphere where it could literally cost me my life.
Yeah. Well spoken. And I think about love is costly. We look at the cross, and it's the most costly expression of love that's ever come. And I love you, and I'm so grateful for you spending this time with me. And I'm grateful that your voice is out there, and I pray for your safety. And it's a privilege to me that our paths crossed. And thank you so much for making the time, now that you're such a big deal, to talk to a little pastor out in Bremerton, Washington.
You know, you talk about the sacrifice. It is not, you know me well enough to know that I'm pretty intentional with the things that I do. Like especially if I'm creating art, like you can go back to my theater days at Bethany, me being very meticulous of theater, and me caring very deeply about that. You know, yeah. In the piece, The Playlist, if you go back and rewatch it, no, there is no Michael Jackson, but it is not by accident that the last song that I'm listening to is talking about the sacrifice that Christ made for us. Mm-hmm. Go back and rewatch it, and there's a moment in there that is paralleling the greatest sacrifice of all. It's come from our Savior, and it was costly. It was difficult. It cost us something. And I just want to say this. I feel like we've talked for 7 hours now, but if your congregation only knew how much we talked before this. But
you want to go to Denny's? Let's go to Denny's.
You know that Denny's isn't there anymore? Did you know that? The Denny's is gone. Yeah, I wanted to say this, man. When it comes to the Tyler Merritt Project, the core of what it's about is it's built in love, man. And I really do believe that everybody at the core of who they are, the core of I don't care what color you are, what background you are, whoever you are, the core of who we are, you want to be loved, you want to be accepted, you want to be known, you want to be heard, you want to laugh, you want to know that people care about you and your well-being. That's at the basis of who we are. People want to know who you are, and you want people to know people want to know who they are, and they want you to know who they are, and you want people to know who you are. And I do believe as we continue to walk through that, if that is like lathered in love, man, we will get there.
We will. Together.
Yes, sir.
Love you, Tyler.
Love you too, bro.
Thanks for being here.